Have you ever wondered how to tell like a true visionary from a con artist?
Hmm.
Because sometimes the line can get pretty blurry, especially when someone has, that undeniable charisma that makes you kind of just want to believe everything they say.
Yeah.
So today on the show, we're going to be unpacking the story of Ernest Garcia II,
Okay.
who is a billionaire who made his fortune in the used car business.
Interesting.
And so is he a genius innovator
Mm-hmm.
or is he a master manipulator?
Yeah.
Let's dive in and see if we can separate fact from fiction.
All right. Sounds good. So what makes Ernest Garcia II's story so compelling is that he's not like a household name, like
Mhm.
maybe some of these like tech moguls that we hear about all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But his story is just as fascinating.
Yeah.
He is a major shareholder in both Carvana and Drive Time,
Wow.
which are two of the biggest players in the used car industry.
Huge.
And his journey is full of these twists and turns
Yeah.
that really make you kind of question, like, what is motivating this guy?
Really makes you think. Okay, so we've got a lot of different sources in front of us today.
Okay.
We've got court documents,
Mm-hmm.
articles from major publications like Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal.
Right.
We've even got some analysis from another podcast that did a deep dive on Carvana.
Oh, wow.
And the picture that's emerging,
Yeah.
well, let's just say it's complicated.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
We're talking about a guy who's built $1 billion empire,
Mm-hmm.
but also has a past conviction for bank fraud.
Oh, wow.
And then on top of that, you've got this unusual corporate structure at
Oh,
Cardano
okay.
that makes you wonder whether or not he's actually prioritizing his own interests
Mm-hmm.
above the interest of his shareholders.
Yeah. That's one of the things that really stood out to me as I was going through all this material.
Mm-hmm.
There is this constant tension between ambition and ethics with him.
Yeah, I see that.
So why don't we start at the beginning? Ernest Garcia II was born in Gallup, New Mexico. His father was a liquor store owner and the town's mayor. So you could say that this entrepreneurial spirit was kind of in his blood from the very beginning.
Yeah, sounds like it.
He went to the University of Arizona, was even on the golf team, but he dropped out before graduating. Not exactly the typical path you see for future billionaires.
It really makes you wonder what was going on in his head at that point.
Yeah.
Was he restless?
Hmm.
Did he already have these like big plans brewing? It's almost like he was in a hurry to make his mark on the world.
Yeah. And make his mark. He did, although it wasn't always in the most positive way.
Right.
His early career was in real estate development, and this is where we see him get tangled up in a major scandal. The Lincoln Savings and Loan Association collapsed in the early 1990s.
Yes.
This was a massive financial scandal that really had these like far-reaching consequences.
Huge.
And Ernest Garcia II found himself right in the thick of it.
Oh, the Charles Keating scandal.
Yeah.
I remember that being on the front page of the news for months.
Yeah.
Wasn't Charles Keating one of the key figures in all of that?
He was, wow.
And so Garcia ends up pleading guilty to bank fraud for his dealings with Lincoln Savings and Loan.
It's a pretty significant blemish on his record, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. Although he did receive a relatively light sentence.
Yeah.
He got 3 years of probation and a $50 fine.
Really?
He cooperated with prosecutors, and that probably contributed to the leniency that he was shown.
It's hard to imagine that someone with a federal conviction on their record
Yeah.
could go on to become a billionaire.
It is wild.
I mean, does a past conviction like that change your opinion about someone's integrity?
Mm-hmm.
Even if they've gone on to achieve great things later in life,
Right.
It really makes you think about the nature of redemption and if people can really change their ways.
I think that's the question that kind of hangs over Garcia's entire career.
Hmm.
Did he learn from his mistakes?
Right.
And did he use that second chance wisely?
Yeah.
Or are we seeing a pattern of risky behavior and maybe even skirting the rules?
That continues throughout his various different business ventures.
One thing's for sure. Ernest Garcia II was not afraid of a challenge.
Mm.
So in 1991, he jumped headfirst into the used car business.
Okay.
And he acquired this struggling rental car company called Ugly Duckling.
Ugly Duckling.
Yeah, and I'm not joking. That was the name of the company.
I mean, it's kind of ironic considering what he ends up accomplishing.
It really is.
But Garcia saw potential where other people just saw problems.
Yeah.
He merged Ugly Duckling with his own financing operation,
Okay.
and he turned it into a used car dealership,
Mm-hmm.
and he focused on a market that a lot of traditional lenders just completely avoided, subprime borrowers.
Can you explain to the listeners what exactly a subprime borrower is?
Sure. So subprime borrowers are people with low credit scores
Okay.
or a history of financial issues,
Mhm.
and that makes them riskier for lenders.
Yeah.
So they often have to face higher interest rates, and they often get less favorable loan terms.
Right.
Garcia realized that this was a big market
Mm-hmm.
and that nobody was really serving them.
Okay.
So he built his business model around providing financing to people who may not have qualified
Right.
for more traditional car loans.
So he was already pushing boundaries
Mm-hmm.
and taking risks
Yeah.
really early on in his career.
Yeah.
Even before Carvana came along.
Mm-hmm.
Was he taking advantage of a vulnerable market?
Yeah.
Or did he actually have a genuine desire to provide a service to people that wasn't already being provided?
Right.
It's really tough to say for sure.
It is, and it gets even more complicated when you consider that he actually took Ugly Duckling public in the 1990s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it didn't exactly go as planned, though, and it
Ow.
kind of left him with this distaste for the public markets.
Okay.
He also faced a bunch of lawsuits during this period,
Wow.
some of which alleged that he was using his position for his own personal gain.
Seems like this is kind of a recurring theme with him.
It does.
That there's a blurring of the lines between his personal ambitions and ethical business practices.
Yeah, for sure.
And this sets the stage for what's going to come next,
Okay.
which is the creation of Drive Time in 2002.
Oh, wow.
So Garcia took Ugly Duckling private,
Mm-hmm.
renamed it Drive Time,
Okay.
and really just doubled down on this focus on subprime lending in the used car market.
Interesting.
And here's the crazy thing.
Yeah.
Drive Time became really successful.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
So, despite all this baggage
Mhm.
and the questionable practices,
Yeah.
he was able to create a really profitable billion-dollar business.
It almost feels like a real-life version of the Wolf of Wall Street, but with cars
Yeah.
instead of penny stocks.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
So Drive Time grew to become the fourth largest used car dealer in the entire United States
Wow.
and generates billions of dollars every year in revenue.
It really speaks to his business skills.
Yeah.
Even if you have some doubts about his methods.
Yeah, even if you don't agree with how he got there.
Right, exactly.
So we're seeing this complex picture of Ernest Garcia II start to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
He's a convicted felon
Yeah.
who turned into this savvy businessman
Mm-hmm.
operating in an industry that isn't exactly known for its ethical purity.
Right.
I mean, what drives someone like that?
Yeah.
Is it really a desire to build something great?
Yeah.
Or is it something more selfish?
Mm-hmm.
A hunger for wealth and power
Yeah.
that just overrides anything else?
That's a good question.
And just when you think you have Garcia figured out,
Mm-hmm.
his son, Ernest Garcia III, enters the picture.
Okay.
And together,
Yeah.
they take the used car business online with the creation of Carvana,
Right.
an online used car marketplace that totally disrupted the industry with their giant car vending machines.
Yeah.
And this promise of a totally hassle-free experience,
Carvana.
it felt like they were everywhere for a while,
Mm-hmm.
with all those flashy ads and their vision of the future of car buying.
Mm.
But even then, I remember hearing whispers about whether they were actually financially stable. Were those concerns justified?
Well, that's what we're going to dig into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We're going to look at how the Garcias took Carvana public, how they navigated the crazy car market during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately how they faced a reckoning that would cost them billions.
All right, we'll be right back.
Welcome back. So we were talking about Ernest Garcia II's move into the used car business,
Right.
where he went from, a past conviction to building two very successful businesses.
Mhm.
But as we dig deeper into Carvana,
Yeah.
which is the online used car retailer founded by Ernest Garcia III,
Right.
we're going to see that this success story gets a bit more complicated.
Okay, so Carvana bursts onto the scene
Yeah.
with this innovative online platform and these like super eye-catching car vending machines.
Right.
It felt like they were completely changing the way people buy cars.
Yeah.
But I remember even back then,
Mm.
hearing people question whether they were financially stable.
Yeah.
Were those concerns justified?
Well, Carvana went public in 2017.
Okay.
And Initially, they experienced like really rapid growth, especially during the pandemic,
I-
because their contactless business model seemed perfect for that time.
Yeah.
But even with all this revenue growth,
Yeah.
Carvana was constantly reporting losses.
Mhm.
And that raises the question, like, was this rapid expansion sustainable?
Right.
Or was it all just going to come crashing down eventually?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And let's not forget about that controversial corporate structure we talked about before.
Right.
It seems like that really starts to matter now.
Yeah.
Can you remind everyone why that structure was such a problem?
Yeah. So Carvana has what's called a dual class share structure, which basically means that the Garcia family has way more voting power than you would expect based on how much of the company they actually own.
Okay.
So to break it down, the Garcias control 85% of the voting shares,
Wow.
even though they own a much smaller percentage of the company overall.
So they own less than half,
Yeah,
but they have the majority of the voting power.
right.
It doesn't seem very fair to the other shareholders.
That's a common criticism, and this becomes even more important when you consider what happens next.
Okay.
During the pandemic, like you said,
Hmm.
Carvana stock just explodes.
Yeah.
Like a lot of other companies that benefited from people staying home.
Right.
There was this idea that their business model was like the future of car buying.
Okay.
And since Ernest Garcia II was the biggest shareholder, his net worth just absolutely skyrockets.
But a lot of people made money on Carvana during that time.
Right.
What makes Ernest Garcia II different?
Okay, so this is where things get interesting.
Yeah.
In 2020, right in the middle of this stock surge,
Yeah.
Ernest Garcia II starts selling off massive amounts of his stock in Carvana. Now, he did do this through a prearranged trading plan called a 10b5-1,
Okay.
which is meant to protect people from accusations of insider trading.
Hold on. Can you explain what a 10b5-1 plan is?
Yeah, so imagine you're an executive at a company,
Okay.
and you know there's some big news coming that's going to affect the stock price.
Right.
Obviously, you can't trade on that information before it's public.
Yeah.
That's insider trading.
Right.
So to avoid even the appearance of any wrongdoing,
Yeah, okay.
you can set up one of these 10b5-1 plans,
Okay.
and that lets you predetermine when and how much stock you're going to buy or sell.
Mm-hmm.
And then those trades just happen automatically,
Oh, okay.
no matter what's happening with the company or the stock price.
So like setting your stock trades to autopilot.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
But even if he wasn't breaking any rules, the timing of all this just seems really suspicious.
Yeah. And the amount of money, too. Over 10 months, he sold over $3.5 billion worth of Carvana stock. Now, some people might say that he was just being a smart investor, taking some profits while protecting himself.
Okay.
But that is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Especially since Carvana was still losing money even with all that revenue growth. So it makes you question his motives and how confident he really was about the company.
It almost feels like he knew something was about to happen.
Yeah.
Like he was getting out before things went bad.
Right.
And it turns out he was right to be worried.
Yeah, in 2022, Carvana's stock price just completely tanks.
Wow.
And billions of dollars in market value just disappear.
What caused that?
Was it just the pandemic bubble bursting?
Yeah.
Or was there something else going on? Well, it was a combination of things.
Oh.
The used car market started to go back to normal after that pandemic craziness.
Right.
Interest rates were going up, which made it more expensive to get a car loan.
Yeah.
And then Carvana got hit with all these legal and regulatory problems. Yeah, they were even temporarily banned from doing business in Illinois
Wow.
for problems with their titles and registration practices.
So this company
Yeah.
that was supposed to be like this big disruptor is now facing all these questions about how they do business
Right.
and whether they can even survive.
Exactly.
What about the Garcias?
Yeah.
Did all of this affect them?
So the Garcia family did lose billions as Carvana's stock went down, but they didn't go broke.
Okay.
Remember, Ernest Garcia II had already sold a bunch of his stock.
Right.
So as of January 2025, his net worth is still estimated to be around $16.2 billion.
Wow.
So he took a hit for sure,
Yeah.
but he's still incredibly wealthy.
It's kind of a reminder that even when a company fails,
Yeah,
the people at the top are often protected from the worst of it.
exactly.
It really makes you think about fairness and accountability and what it means to have so much power.
It's a really good point.
And it's not just about the money either.
Right.
We're talking about people's jobs and their ability to get a car.
Yeah.
When a company like Carvana has problems,
Yeah.
it affects real people. in a very real way.
That's an important thing to remember.
Right.
The rise and fall of Carvana isn't just some Wall Street story.
Right.
It's a story about how a company's actions can impact so many people.
Yeah, totally.
And it takes us back to that original question we asked about visionaries versus con artists.
Right.
Are we seeing real innovation here?
Yeah.
Or is this just reckless risk-taking and selfish behavior dressed up as something new and exciting?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
And it becomes even harder to answer when you consider how many people were hurt
Right.
by all of this.
That brings us to the final chapter of Ernest Garcia II's story.
Okay.
What happens after Carvana's decline, and what does his whole journey tell us about success in the business world?
All right, let's get into it. It's been quite a ride with Ernest Garcia II.
It really has.
From his early days in real estate
Yeah.
to his big moves in the used car industry, we've seen him at his best.
Right.
We've seen him at his worst.
For sure.
And through it all,
Yeah.
we keep coming back to that same question.
Yeah.
Is he a visionary leader who changed everything?
Right.
Or a really clever guy who only ever looks out for number one?
That's the million-dollar question.
And it's a question that doesn't seem to have an easy answer.
No, not at all.
And I think that's what makes Garcia's story so fascinating. But also a little bit unsettling.
Yeah.
Because it forces us to think about what success really means.
Right.
And what ambition and ethics look like in the business world.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've seen this same pattern throughout his career.
Yeah.
This willingness to push the limits, to operate in those gray areas where it's not clear what's right and wrong.
Yeah, you can see it from the very beginning.
Right,
With that bank fraud conviction early on. Yeah. And it seems like that approach kind of carried over into his used car businesses, both with Drive Time and with Carvana.
Yeah, it's like that early conviction, even though it happened so long ago, is still a really important part of his story.
Right.
It makes you wonder if that was just a one-time mistake or if it's a sign of something deeper.
Exactly.
And when you look at the accusations in those lawsuits against both Drive Time and Carvana, you see those same echoes, that same willingness to bend the rules to get ahead.
Yeah, definitely.
Like the way he set up Carvana to give himself and his son all that control, even though they don't own that much of the company.
Right.
It might be legal, but it just feels wrong.
Yeah, ethically it's questionable.
Exactly.
And then you've got those massive stock sales during the pandemic.
Right.
It's hard not to think that he was taking advantage of that inflated stock price.
Yeah.
Knowing that the company was facing some serious problems. And that other investors would be the ones left holding the bag when everything came crashing down.
It's like he knew he was going to win no matter what happened.
Exactly.
Heads, he wins. Tails, everyone else loses.
Yeah, it doesn't feel right.
It really doesn't.
So it makes you wonder what Ernest Garcia II's legacy is going to be. Will people remember him as this brilliant entrepreneur who shook up the whole industry?
Right.
Or as someone who built his fortune by taking advantage of people and leaving a lot of damage behind? It's a tough one.
It really is.
On the one hand, he's obviously got a knack for spotting opportunities and for building successful businesses. I mean, Drive Time and Carvana are both really innovative companies.
Yeah. And they really challenged the way things were done in the used car market.
For sure.
You can't deny that.
No, definitely not.
And he created a lot of wealth, not just for himself and his family, but for his employees and early investors too.
Right.
But then on the other hand, he always seems to be pushing the boundaries of what's ethical. And he doesn't seem to care about the consequences of his actions. Right.
It's hard to square those two sides of him.
It really is.
It makes you think about that question of whether you can separate the art from the artist. Can you admire what someone's achieved even if you don't like how they did it?
Yeah.
In Garcia's case, I don't think there's an easy answer.
Me neither.
And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that success isn't always black and white.
Right.
And even the smartest people can be motivated by things that aren't so great.
It reminds us that we need to pay attention, not just as investors, but as consumers and citizens.
Absolutely.
We need to look beyond the hype, the charisma, all those promises about changing the world.
Yeah.
And we need to ask some hard questions about the people behind the products and services we buy.
What are their values?
Yeah.
What have they done in the past? And most importantly, Are they really making the world a better place?
Yeah.
Or are they just looking out for themselves?
Those are questions we should be asking about everyone in a position of power.
For sure.
Not just about people like Ernest Garcia II.
Right.
And as for Garcia himself,
Yeah.
well, his story isn't over yet. Only time will tell how it all ends.
True.
But one thing's for sure.
Yeah.
It's a story that will keep us talking.
Yeah.
And make us question what success really means.
It definitely will.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Of course.